Beneath the black tapestry of endless stars, the galaxy breathes in silence so dense it suffocates prophecy. Before banners of thunder crowned terrace horizon, and before the emperor's image became sanctified myth, a force older than memory crept behind existence, untouched and unnamed. It was neither light nor darkness, neither the chaos of the warp nor the cold expanse beyond, but a wound stitched into fate itself, a presence erasing evidence as it moved, binding what history calls destiny. It is not found in the prayers of saints or the war chants of angels. The greatest archivists of the Adeptus Mechanicus trace only riddles in their deepest tomes. Fragments, deletions, warnings encoded in numbers so ancient that even the most sacred cogitators stall before the truth. Beware that which was not written, a data boast mutters from the edge of Mars. No chronicle is safe from the corrosion of what once dwelled only in void. Before Chronos marked the turning of stars, this silent force guided the formation of empires with an exiled hand. Throne world itself trembles atop secrets, concealed in bedrock and entropy, a foundation shaped by dread, by bargains never spoken aloud. Even the emperor, peerless and unbroken, gazed into the fire of this origin only once. What he saw did not become holy canon, it became nightmare. His triumphs, iron-willed and fiercely guided, remain haunted by a single, invisible flaw. The shadow behind his legend. Long ago, the first priests of mankind found unknown glyphs among ruins predating any known civilization. They prayed not to gods, but to silence, for silence was the only force they felt answered their terror. Civilization arises, and always, behind the mastery of men and the cycles of rebellion, the entity's echo persists, undeterred, unbowed. Powerful beings and mad prophets spoke only in whispers, fearing memory itself. For in every age, this secret sculptor, unseen and undying, presses its will. It decides, erases, waits. For every golden triumph, there is a price. For every act of rebellion, a new thread woven in darkness. So the force remains, unnamed, unclaimed, a shadow at the root of mankind's fate, shaping the war before any sword was drawn. And each time destiny is declared, the void claims its sacrifice, silent as ancient stars. The secret force decided mankind's fate, then vanished into legend's margins.
In the beginning there was only silence. Not the silence of peace, nor the hush before war, but the void. A silence so profound it erased even the memory of its own creation. In this primordial darkness there emerged something alien to the very concept of time. Not matter, not energy, not thought. An entity, nameless and veiled, older than the stars and colder than entropy itself. Long before mankind charted the stars or dared record its arrogance in stone and circuit, this force circled the edge of all prophecy. It wove through the foundations of worlds yet unnamed, shaping possibilities not by command but by omission. For what is fate if not the default design left behind when every other destiny is swallowed by the void? No legends recall its coming. The oldest priests found its marks but could not decipher them. The Mechanicum, gazing through data fog, stumbled over numbers that screamed warnings in dead tongues. The Sumerians invoked deities whose faces faded as dust in dusk. Egypt's pharaohs stared at the sky, haunted by constellations that moved in patterns forbidden to mortal reckoning. Within secret crypts beneath old earth, priesthoods gathered, their robes stitched with symbols of vanished eras. By torchlight they traded whispers. Beware the voice that speaks in silence. Their rituals were not prayers, they were acts of desperation. Sacrifices were laid upon altars built of stone and regret, not to placate a god, but to earn ignorance. For in every story of salvation lurks the hunger for forgetting, a wish to not know the price paid so that empires might rise. Unseen, the entity moved. It did not offer blessings or miracles, nor did it demand worship. Instead, its signature appeared as paradox, the riddle that drives the dreamer mad, the gesture of a hand never raised but always felt. Even the earliest architects of civilization found inexplicable wounds in their myth cycles. The historian of Ur recorded, then burned a scroll naming the one who unmakes destiny. A Babylonian prophet, whose eyes saw beyond the edge of nightmare, declared, "The gods are puppets, and the puppet strings are made of absence." Epoch followed epoch, each civilization born, each empire erasing another, each faith rewriting the coded warnings of primordial terror. The entity's shadow, always present, nudged events into patterns that defied understanding. A city rose because a river ran dry not once, but precisely twice in 1,000 years. A dynasty fell because a single star blinked out in a season when omens said it should burn. Always, in the aftermath, the questions drowned under the stories of human struggle. Never did the true architect step from the dark. It was in those deepest crypts where the first priests of Mars, long before Mechanicum unity, encountered a bruise at the heart of reality, a wound shaped like silence itself. They called it Genesis Unbidden, a myth older than the language used to describe it. In oil-lit secrecy, they attempted containment. Every algorithm, every prayer and data cant was not a plea for power, but a barricade against knowing. But knowledge bleeds, memory fractures. The emperor, yet to claim the title, yet to be rendered myth, wandered in thought across the sanctums of old Terra. He searched with a mind unclouded by war, unbent by centuries, knowing instinctively that victory would never be a gift, but a wound to be survived. He found beneath the crust of the world relics inscribed with equations that bled paradox. The Mechanicum's deepest cogitators crashed before these numbers, but the emperor studied and turned away, whispering, "Destiny is not made, it is survived." Elsewhere, at the edges of civilization, mad prophets awoke in the shadows. The Atlanteans, before the sea became their tomb, had stories not of gods, but of judgments. Judgments spoken in waves, in storms, in silence. And in the ruins left behind, in the glyphs no civilization could translate, the entity waited, shaping the lore behind the myth. 1,000 empires rose and fell. Each left offerings in the form of knowledge. Each gained power, always at a cost. And within each foundation stone, beneath every golden facade, the secret force wrote its name in nothingness. Mankind's history is built on bargains neither spoken nor understood. From the dust of fallen cities, new legends rose. The Mechanicum encoded forbidden truths in binary prayers and oil-streaked rituals. They built proto-temples, not to worship, but to ward off knowledge. The Adeptus Mechanicus mapped out the wounds in reality, recording data not for posterity, but for quarantine. Yet containment was never possible. What moved in the void existed before the concept of before. The entity's influence drifted through the patterns of thought, the mad dreams of prophets, the invention of technologies too advanced for their time. Glitches appeared in the sacred archives, star maps that rearranged themselves, transmission signals echoing with voices that spoke only in riddles. In forbidden databanks on Mars, a myth was born, one so dangerous that most Mechanicum never learned it. The sleeping wound will one day open, and humanity will forget its name while believing it is divine. The oldest priests, those who chanted in both binary and in forgotten human dialects, set guardians not over the physical, but over thought itself. The enemy was not alien. nor was it chaos. The enemy was remembering. On Terra, saints rose, their miracles tempered by terror. The Adeptus sorceries swept before altars, praying for forgetfulness. In the black vaults of the Inquisition, heresy was stamped out not for moral purity, but for ignorance. The knowledge of the entity was consigned to oblivion. But oblivion is a leaky vault. The Emperor, armoring himself for the wars to come, looked into the abyss and saw not glory, but warning. Each victory would bear a signature not his own. Each power gained would be tainted by the price left unpaid. So the Emperor chose silence, and in silence, the entity flourished. Galaxy-wide, cosmic storms erupted. Astropaths heard whispers in warp echoes, not chaos or demon, but prophecy. The sense of something waiting. The seeds of the Adeptus Astartes were sown with secrets. Their gene seed, sanctified but never pure, bore a whisper, an encrypted symptom of corruption layered beneath oaths of loyalty. The Adeptus Mechanicus continued to build, to worship, to innovate. Beneath each stride forward, a tremor persisted. Every ritual was both weapon and barrier, a sword to fight knowledge, a shield against remembering. The more they learned, the more they forgot. In the void, demons howled. Upon the throne world, saints wept. But always the entity pressed its will unseen. It avoided the spotlight of history, preferring the blood seeped through cracks in reality. Empires built their own cages. Humanity, believing itself saved by the Emperor, built legacies atop foundations already trembling with the consequences of the bargain. The Mechanicum locked away their greatest texts. The Ecclesiastes denied 1,000 heresies, and the silent priesthoods erased rather than revealed. Because knowledge of the secret meant bargaining with it, and to bargain with it was to fall. What moves behind the architect of men is not man nor God. We are only the clay. Not all creators leave monuments. Some leave wounds that shape empires. Victory is always a wound, every salvation a scar. And so the entity waits, for the moment fate bends anew, for the instant when destiny is not chosen, but claimed. Across empires, the origin of the Warhammer 40K universe is entwined with forbidden technologies and mythic dread. In the void between dying stars, the Adeptus Mechanicus whispered of forbidden genesis. Thus the origin, thus the shadow. Before any age of technology, before the first wars of man, before even the concept of divine order, the secret force cast its judgment across eternity, and every future was shaped before the present learned its name.
Order did not emerge from chaos by accident. It was called forth, chiseled with designs older than hope, then crowned with banners none could fathom. Humanity had clawed its way out from extinction's pit 1,000 times, each epoch bearing a new illusion of mastery. But illusions are shelter for the fearful. Beneath their comfort, something ancient scripts the true pattern of ascent. The void, which had once erased possibility, now watched as ambition dared reshape the world. At the edge of memory, on dust-caked Terra, the Emperor marched, more myth than man, more force than flesh, a vision wielded by fate and weaponized by legend. Even the boldest Astartes saw in him something they could never name, an intensity that blinded all but the most insane prophets. Yet behind those eyes burned a secret, a recognition of strings tugged not by his hand, but by that silent entity that had haunted civilization's birth. Beneath the citadels, the Mechanicum hammered out the rudiments of hope. Their prayers were algorithms, their miracles etched in metal and blood. The omnicia myth, coded into eternity, was never fully believed even by its acolytes.
In the layers of Mars, in the circuits running through the great forges, the influence of the entity persisted, a ghost in the machine, a fork in logic where every ritual hinted at the wound beneath the code. Galactic unity was an ambition so dangerous it risked annihilation by its own necessity. The unification wars forged a species, but always, behind victory, there was cost, and every casualty seemed preordained, every betrayal cast in shadow before the blade was drawn. Soldiers swore blood oaths not just to the Emperor, but to silence. Let my memory be erased before I recall the hour of true bargain. Each cohort, each legion, each war machine was an attempt not simply to conquer, but to insulate against remembrance of what moved in the void. The Emperor's rise was dreamlike, sudden, inevitable, tragic in its power. He bound together the fractured remnants of old night, age-old planetary tyrants, psychic disasters, genetic perversions, and in so doing, he wrote the first lines of salvation's myth. But myth is a prison for the unexamined truth. Behind ritual and rank, behind banners and sleepless ambition, was always the entity, molding success with the certainty of future heartbreak. Each triumph, the emperors, the mechanicums, the Astartes, carried the scent of the wound. The closer humanity approached unity, the deeper the flaw carved its silent pattern in their victories. The emperor's vision was uncompromising. Every world must kneel or fall. His psychic clarity sliced through corruption. His justice punished not the weak, but the forgetful. In his eyes, empire was a necessary lie. The entity watched, sometimes amused, sometimes moved by the potential for calamity. As the Great Crusade stretched across the cosmos, the fabric of reality shimmered, then bent. Psychic resonances flared, not randomly, but as echoes of that original bargain. The Astronomonican, beacon of salvation, hummed with a frequency that triggered nervous dread in the boldest astropaths. Blood ran beneath the thrones of subjugated worlds. The Primarchs, children of aspiration and consequence, awoke into destinies already defined by the invisible hand. Rituals grew dense, sequences packed with double meanings, untranslatable signals, moments where even the cogitators paused as if hesitating before an abyss. In the vaults of Mars, Archmagos debated whether knowledge was curse or blessing. Saints on Terra wept for victories too clean, too bright, suspecting that the light itself had been paid for in coin they couldn't count. The closer the Imperium drew to order, the louder the echoes of the entity's judgment resonated in the cracks between prayers and protocols. Celebrations were fleeting. Each new conquest revealed a greater hunger, a deeper flaw. Imperial historians recorded triumph after triumph without recognizing the stutter in causality, the recurring glitch that marked every legend as haunted by prophecy. In the airless palaces where demagogues plotted rebellion and loyalists feared their own conviction, restless dreams persisted. Images of void-touched shadows, bargains written in screams, silhouettes of the emperor confronted by terror he dared not name. The war machines of the Mechanicum expanded. Their size and awe grew not simply because the empire demanded it, but because the entity required the spectacle. Blood and metal, faith and data, all pieces arranged in a chessboard no one knew had a hidden dimension. The Adeptus Astartes bore their gene seeds into the vacuum, fated creations, sanctified warriors, brilliant lies. Brave men and monsters alike trembled before their arrival. But even as new orders formed, every oath contained a single moment of doubt. Was this truly the Emperor's will, or a darker thread running beneath? Whispers moved within the ranks. Legionaries heard fragments in their sleep. Victory is never free. The architect watches. Bargain defeats are planned. Tech priests denied, then documented, then deleted anomalous records.
The emperor himself, immutable yet vulnerable in his silence, watched the stars for a sign not of approval, but of danger returned. Every new advance, every planetary victory was, at its heart, an inventory of losses already shaped by the entity's hand. Galaxy-wide, the entities of chaos threatened but never surpassed the shadow cast by the original wound. Demons howled in warp storms, but even they paused at the scent of a deeper origin, a hunger unattached to their predations. Humanity's greatest enemies recognized the flaw but never spoke of it. They feared its silence more than any blade. Beneath the triumphal monuments, secret cults formed, praying not for salvation, but for understanding. The cult of the machine god fractured, some acolytes driven mad by visions of the entity rewriting the schematic of reality. Imperial agents were commissioned not only to enforce peace, but to erase archives. What you do not remember cannot betray you, whispered one inquisitor. The ascent itself became myth, a story retold with embellishments, erasures, and self-imposed blindness. Every world united was built upon a foundation of dread. The closer the Imperium came to its zenith, the more it pressed upon the edge of catastrophe. Who writes the laws of victory? Who moves in silence behind the sung hymn of empire? The emperor asked, but only in solitude, when history itself seemed to watch him watching. The entity did not interfere, it simply observed, judged, nudged. It pressed against the boundaries of knowledge, rewarding boldness with tragedy, courage with corruption. And so the ascent of order was always a negotiation, a series of bargains struck in blood and unnamed currency. The Adeptus Mechanicus monitored fluctuations in the Astronomicon. Each spike was interpreted as a blessing or a curse, but the truth lay deeper. The entity was testing the perimeter of fate, reshaping laws so subtly that none outside myth could perceive it. The priests wondered at their flaws, prayed for improvement, and watched the echo of prophecy bleed into their algorithms. Even the emperor, armored in legend and destiny, wore his victories with sorrow. I have united mankind beneath banners of hope, but I have paid a price set by a force I cannot name. Unity is both weapon and warning. Ascent is the shape of the wound hidden beneath every triumph. That was the lesson none wanted, but all received. The rise of order, the creation of unity, the expansion of hope, each a shadowed mirror reflecting the entity's paradox. In the aftermath of glory, the Imperium trembled. Restless knights and senators, magos and priests awoke with memories of bargains struck in dreams, of dark figures watching from the corners of victory. The Mechanicum invented new rituals to ward off dread. The Astartes swore oaths always shadowed by ambiguity. As the Great Crusade reached its apex, the sense of impending catastrophe grew even more intense, not as fear, but as bartered consequence. Fate, that silent architect, waited. And so order rose, gleaming, awe-inspiring, and fundamentally wounded. The Empire's ascent was not the overcoming of darkness, but its embrace, not the end of prophecy, but its survivor. The higher hope soars, the more certain doom becomes. The Emperor, his loyalists, the Mechanicum, and all the saints of Terra finally understood the ascent was not the end, but the beginning of the next bargain.
The hour of triumph was never meant to endure. The entity, the silent sculptor of fate, had marked every ascent with inevitable fracture. When empires gleamed brightest, that is when their roots wrought deepest. Human unity, fiercely wrought and ritualistically praised, soon quivered under the pressure of cosmic consequence. Victory was always a mask for foreboding silence, concealing the ancient wound at the heart of humanity's destiny. The Emperor, once the architect of hope and myth, began to sense the cost written in every echo. The shadows beneath his might lengthened, not because enemies grew bolder, but because the foundation of power had been laid atop secrets best left unspoken. His visions darkened, and his dreams, normally unbreakable, felt the chilling caress of doubt. In every oath a flaw trembled. Within every coin of loyalty, betrayal had already been minted. Corruption is seldom chaos. It is purpose inverted, intent turned inward, meaning drowned in paradox. The Primarchs, sculpted as the living embodiment of unity, bore within their souls both the Emperor's stirring hope and the echo of the entity's design. Horus was the first to dream. His nightmares bled not with monsters, but with absence. The presence he glimpsed was not evil, but pure doubt, a blasphemy deeper than the warp. Destiny, when tainted by origin, unravels without warning. The greatest rebellion, the Horus heresy, did not begin with a clash of swords, but with the silent shiver in Horus's heart. It was a moment of emptiness, when faith blinked before the void. The entity pressed closer, whispering possibilities into the mind of the favored son. To supplant the Emperor is to inherit the wound he cannot bear. On the world of Davin, beneath rotting moons, Horus hesitated, his questioning stare reflecting memory's poison. The seeds of kinship burned away in a psychic storm. What remained was not hatred, but a paradox. Every crown forged in unity rests above a buried tomb. Sanguinius, avatar of hope, dreamt of rivers running red with his undoing. Russ, forged for wild war, slew truth with every foe. Guilliman, the master rebuilder, stacked order upon order, knowing in his bones that corruption would swamp his achievements. Fulgrim, whose ambition was limitless, found himself caressing creation and decay, eyes ablaze with the hunger to belong where he could not. The legions, once angels of deliverance, transformed into architects of ruin. Every fresh triumph rendered the empire more brittle. The more rigid the order, the deeper the cracks. Ritual became obsession. Prayer turned to bargaining. The more imperial power sought to shield itself, the hollower its sanctums became. Even the Adeptus Mechanicus, obsessed with iron faith and algorithmic truth, documented anomalies so terrifying that entire libraries were erased. But paranoia only amplifies the wound. The priests denied their fear, only to enshrine it in double-coded rituals of denial. Astropaths felt the warp twist, not with chaotic invasion, but with laughter that echoed from the corners of prophecy. Inquisition tried to banish knowledge, but found memory itself rebelling. Forgetting took on the flavor of terror. Every archive burned in these ages was a sacrifice to the entity, a desperate measure, doomed to fail. The Emperor, alone atop his spectral throne, watched the seeds of ruin sprout. He understood at last. Ascending humanity required division. Forging unity cost nemesis. He saw, with that singular gaze, the price of order marked in the very souls of his sons. On Istivon's dark plains, kin slew kin not out of rage, but out of design. The massacre, long foreshadowed by deeper prophecy, unfolded with the inevitable rhythm of old bargains.
Cities dissolved in storms that were equal parts psychic and metaphorical. The entity observed, never cruel, never gleeful, but simply patient. Ambition must always fracture. Loyalty must always fail when the wound is left untended. In the aftermath, loyalists clung to shattered banners, cultists chanted hymns of bitter nostalgia, and archivists buried truths in vaults whose locks were made of lies. The Mechanicum, sensing the pattern but unable to arrest it, sealed knowledge as if knowledge itself was the contagion. Agents of the ecclesiastici began using faith as an anesthesia, a spiritual numbness, rather than a gateway to hope. Every side branded itself the Redeemer. Every hero became a villain, every villain an agent of larger tragedy. The echoes shattered the warp, not as warning, but as promise. The next chapter in the reign of the wound. Betrayal in the Warhammer 40K mythos is not the absence of faith, but faith inverted. The moment when loyalty becomes a weapon for ruin. They became the monsters they once hunted. Corruption resists simple identification. It is not the sheer absence of virtue, but the creation of a new virtue based on denial, silence, and hidden bargains. Each Primarch wrestled with the paradox, and each fell or fractured in proportion to their proximity to the Emperor's original dream. The age of heresy bled across the galaxy. Tape-recorded prayers mixed with screams. Forbidden archives hummed the notes of longing. Models of imperial order began to glitch. Inescapable feedback loops of violence, each justified by a fragment of original hope. Rival armies believed themselves chosen, but all were acting out the script written by the entity in ages past. Was it chaos or the secret force that set Horus's heart ablaze? The entity never revealed an explicit agenda. Its fingerprints were only found in the aperture of despair, the moment when power became its own undoing. The ecclesiastici sanctified martyrdom, but every saint heard a ghostly voice at the last. To die for unity is to die for the wound. The Mechanicum, wearied by anomaly, constructed ever more elaborate rituals, mistaking complexity for sanctuary. Darkness crept across dead cities. Cathedrals became mausoleums, their living priests shadows of former faith. The Adepta Sorestaris wept as they buried fallen relics, dreams, and kin. The Inquisition devolved into the policing of nightmares, excommunicating minds rather than men. Yet the entity did not rage. It measured. It layered its influence into fate, rewriting what prophecy once made sacred into the architecture of new despair. The Emperor's fall unfolded not as tragedy to be grieved, but as the fulfillment of a wound too old for healing. His body, entombed and endlessly worshipped, radiated not hope, but reminder. Corruption is legacy. What the age of heresy spawned, conflict, chaos, cult, and cosmic dread, cannot be erased. All that endures is the wound, invisible, omnipresent, writing itself endlessly into every legend. The Mechanicus, tapping into lost technologies, began to fear progress itself. The Adeptus Sorestaris hid their dread behind hymns, but every note was an echo looking for the next silence. The empire fractured. Some sought redemption in prophecy. Others succumbed to the intoxicating logic of doom. The fall is not destruction, but rebirth for shadow in new flesh. Survivors wandered the ruins, haunted not just by loss,
but by the knowledge that every legend is a warning, every song of triumph a camouflage for suffering yet to be reckoned. Every oath broken, every brother lost, each flicker of rebellion, these are not scars upon the surface, but bricks in the temple of the entity's design. At the edge of memory, those who remain whisper in fear, "We are not the masters of our own destiny. We are the echo of the wound, and its shadow is endless."
Beneath every archive sealed, and every cathedral lost to fires of denial, a truth sleeps, a coil of prophecy too dark for prayer, too immense for reason. It is not a rumor, but an old gravity, a pull at the roots of every memory mankind has ever tried to bury. In the aftermath of empire's collapse, as ashes fell like the dust of forgotten stars, the echo of the wound grew louder, a murmur neither daemon nor god could silence. The centuries that followed were shadows painted over ruin. Historians rewrote the heavens in careful lies. Priests invented new penances. The Mechanicum encrypted warnings and rituals so dense that they became incomprehensible even to themselves. But vaults cannot keep out prophecy, and catacombs cannot shield the soul from what it already knows. Survivors heard whispers in their dreams, a language older than spoken fear, a breath at the edge of consciousness. "Remember what was erased," the dream said, "for forgetting is the most dangerous heresy." The Inquisition, guardians of amnesia, launched purges designed as much for self-protection as the preservation of truth. Heretics were silenced, but the silence only thickened, the burden of forbidden knowledge growing heavier with each memory consumed by flame. Rumors flowered in secret of an entity that did not serve, did not hunger, but simply shaped. That every act of rebellion, every miracle, every hope, was written on a palimpsest of secrets so old no living mind could endure them whole. Deep below the ecclesiarchy's vaults, books bound in human skin told stories of a pact struck between the First Empire and something vast in the dark. Not an enemy, not a god to be worshipped nor feared, but a presence, an absence, that defined its terms through silence and negation. "All futures bend here," wrote a mad confessor before disappearing, "as light bends around gravity." The emperor's greatest terror was not defeat, but discovery. If truth is a wound, then denial is its keeper. The Mechanicum's most ancient archives, relics from before the schism, hinted at a time when even the emperor knelt before destiny. No text reveals what was offered, but every legend hints at a silence paid for in blood, a memory erased so that the present could proceed. The greatest heresy, in the end, was not rebellion, but revelation. The entity left no monuments, only absences. Its occultation was total. Archives showed not contradiction, but gaps, spaces where the fabric of commandment and curse had been lifted away. Manuscripts decayed just so, leaving the vital lines unreadable, prophecies fragmentary, names blotted out by mold, as if entropy itself had become an agent. The Black Library, repository for all things forbidden, became a mausoleum of questions no sage could answer. And still, the whispers persisted. The emperor, enthroned in decay, was heard to mutter when delirium overtook his silence. "He think me immortal," his shade said, "but even a god can bleed if the wound is old enough." The true enemy is not chaos, it is the memory behind the veil. He mourned not failure, but the certainty that everything built upon the bargain would fall again. Among the Astartes, trauma became bloodline. Some felt haunted by nightmares they never lived, echoes of betrayal, lust for ascension, apocalyptic visions threaded with absence.
The greatest warriors of the New Age felt always as if their heroism was a costume, worn to distract from the certainty that something watched from the curtains, noting every triumph and savoring every defeat. What if the gods mankind forgot never truly left? What if they were only waiting for memory to stumble? Rogue traders and lost sons of the Imperium, scouring the void for profit or truth, stumbled upon forbidden ruins, alien, yes, but more ancient than any Xenos race. They found temples built in impossible geometry, scribed with equations that described not events, but probabilities, hints of futures strangled at birth. Some vanished. Some returned as mad prophets, begging the Ordo Malleus for oblivion. Their warning was always the same. Do not assemble the broken truths. There was a pattern beneath the pattern. As empires crawled back to a semblance of order, secret societies formed, most sworn not to expand knowledge, but to keep it fragmented. Some inquisitors were tasked specifically with ensuring that the legend of the wound would remain untraceable. Burn selected archives, forge evidence, seed new rumors, and persecute those whose nightmares came too close to coherence. Ignorance is humanity's armor, declared a lord of the Ordo Hereticus. The emperor taught us the value of lies. Yet nothing worth hiding ever stays hidden. In dark cathedrals, aging saints confessed to sins they did not recall committing, trembling before altars where the candles flickered not with wind, but with the breath of denial escaping. The Mechanicum, racked by error, found their most sacred machines would halt without explanation, restarting only after cryptic psalms were chanted, psalms whose origin was erased from all but the most forbidden lexicons. The hidden truth was thus, though. Every triumph of humanity bore the mark of a cost paid without consent, a debt signed by hands on forgotten altars. The entity had not left. It simply waited for epochs to pass, for the memory of the bargain to grow cool, then cold, then part of the fossil record of civilization itself. It reframed every story. It was the shadow by which light judged itself, the silence that makes all prayers suspect. The emperor's most trusted counselors became unreliable, plagued by visions of an empire collapsing into recursive prophecy. Libraries purged, Mechanicum schisms widened, Astarte legacies grew tainted by secrets coded in gene seed. Even the warp seemed to pulse in tune with the wound's rhythm. New demons arose, bearing names that meant nothing and everything to those who heard them. The difference between prophecy and betrayal is a memory lost in darkness. On the edge of imperial space, isolated worlds experienced collective nightmares, vast machines assembling themselves from raw ore, speaking in riddles and blueprints. Cults formed, swirling around the notion that knowledge itself was a trap set long before their ancestors rose from apes. The ecclesiarchy sent exterminators, the Mechanicum sent obliterators, but neither erased the sense that all efforts were variations of a dance already choreographed by the hidden force. If archives contain only what is permitted, if saints remember only curated suffering, if every relic is a cipher, what legacy can there truly be? The answer, whispered by the shadows, is that nothing survives unmarked by the wound. All history is palimpsest. Every epic is recursion. Every hero, a pawn, remembered for participating in a myth written in the blood of oversight. The truth is not in what remains, but in what cannot be restored. When the dawn finally breaks over the battered Imperium, it brings with it not comfort, but dread. For even in triumph, the survivors carry the unease of bargains unkept, of knowledge paid for in the currency of memory and silence. Human progress is revealed as a phenomenon built not on invention, but repression. Wisdom as a byproduct of engineered forgetting. Beneath the ruins, the entity cedes nothing, knowing patience will always outlast ambition. Faith bends, science fractures, and even legend fails, but the pattern endures. Every cathedral is built atop an old graveyard. Every dawn is the shadow of midnight unresolved. If humanity aspires to break free, it must first name the enemy. But naming is precisely what the wound forbids. Where does this leave the inheritors of the stars? Their maps are incomplete, their legends filled with gaps that swallow meaning. Trust in the silence, says one lost seer, for it was chosen as the guardian of hope's greatest lie. And so the hidden force continues to shape fate from the margins, sculpting every possibility so subtly that none recognize their servitude until the day, perhaps, they do. In the mythos of Warhammer 40K, hidden truth is a weapon of fate. Every archive is a wound, every prophecy a warning encrypted in silence.
The wounds of history do not close, they deepen. The Imperium crawls forward through time, molting civilization after civilization, each layer a memory bruised by betrayal and ashes. Where light once blazed from the banners of unity, shadows now congregate in silence, knitting despair into the very marrow of worlds. The entity, original, patient, infinite, watches from its unseen throne as mankind staggers, blind to the wound that first bent its fate. What remains is a paradox, ruin woven into prophecy. The triumphs of the emperor, once indelible and golden, have decayed into rituals performed by the desperate, the embittered, and the devoutly incurious. For every new dawn claimed by the ecclesiarchy, the soot of yesterday's betrayal drifts from the windows like forgotten stars. In the great basilicas where hope was once mass-produced, relics now shudder with the ghostly residue of bargains unspoken and debts unpaid. Ashes are the language of memory in the Imperium. They cling to every prayer and corridor, infusing coins, blood, and algorithms alike. The Mechanicum sweeps dust from altars only to reveal deeper layers of corrosion. Tech priests, lifelong enemies of entropy, sense their algorithms returning answers in circles, tautologies that encode denial, not understanding. Above them all, the Astronomicon pulses in its failing rhythm, the last heartbeat of a patient succumbing to an undiagnosed wound. Every artifact, every cathedral, every piece of data held close by the Inquisition is haunted by what it omits. The black ships harvest psychers, culling any whose touch comes too close to the hidden truth. No one says what everyone knows. Beneath the rules, beneath the rituals, beneath the deathless icons of sainthood, the root system of the entity threads every world. Wars are fought not for truth or peace, but for the right to forget that the price was set long before conception. In this aftermath, mankind seeks solace in repetition. The centuries become ceremony, wars looping into wars, reforms collapsing into rot, saints made of men whose only virtue was to never remember too well. For the few whose visions do not fade, the price is madness. The Imperium secretly reveres and erases its true seers in equal measure. We are cursed to repeat our denials, whispers a condemned astropath, because memory is where the wound breathes. The light fades, but echoes remain, an empire that listens more to ghosts than to future hopes. The Adeptus Astartes, embroidered with hundreds of campaigns in coat of arms, now exist in melancholic stratification. Their legends, once pathways to glory, are now maps of loss. Gene seed files whispering of unlockable heresies, glories predestined to end in darkness. Veteran brothers instruct neophytes not just in war, but in the necessity of selective remembrance. Know your legacy, but never look back too far, for the abyss of knowledge is a chasm that devours the unwise. Each planetary governor, each High Lord of Terra, rules with an authority that feels borrowed, if not openly fraudulent. Whole bureaucracies evolve to manage the fraying lines of narrative, history written and rewritten not by victors, but by survivors fleeing prophecy's snare. What began as a grand experiment in order and empire has become an endless exercise in containment. Souls, stories, data, all sequestered behind thicker and thicker walls of ritual denial. Legacy is not glory remembered, but catastrophe survived, then reconstructed anew. Yet amid the decline, glimmers of mythic insight bloom. Sects rise up within hive cities, scavenging for remnants of pre-lapsarian lore. Their punishments are dreadful, but so is their hunger. On some forbidden planets, preacher kings lead revival cults around artifacts that sing at night, their frequencies somehow resonating with the psychic wound left in the wake of betrayal. The Inquisition is dragged into endless cycles of murder and mercy, their ranks filled with zealots perpetually haunted by the intuition that somewhere, beneath the coded dogma, there is a reckoning not yet paid. The titanic forges of Mars thunder on, but workers report dreams shared across generations, visions of hollowed stars, of the Emperor's shadow speaking in untranslatable signals, of the universe tipped at a precarious angle where gods and bargains blur. No machine god answers clearly, and the ritual only thickens the shadows. The Mechanicum, unable to destroy what they cannot name, outsource their dread into ever more elaborate mythologies. Meanwhile, the ecclesiarchy erects new shrines atop the bones of old. Crusades are launched, but always against symptoms, never causes. Heretics chased not for their acts, but for their dangerous proximity to memory. Relics multiply, but each is a lens that distorts, not clarifies, the true origin of pain. The saints that smile from stained glass windows are as much symbols of loss as of hope, luminous illusions built to soften the gaze of those who would stare too long into the wound. Every legend in the Imperium is crafted to replace memory, not celebrate achievement. The entity's legacy operates in layers: psychic, historical, technological, and emotional. It is neither a curse nor a blessing. It is the soil from which all empire and all despair must grow. Where warp storms rage, the observer kisses the memory of the wound but cannot speak it. Where Black Templars burn traitors in their thousands, it is not doctrine that inflames them, but the ancient suspicion that purity is a mask for forgetting a bargain's price. Even the Emperor's immortal shell, fed by 1 billion souls each day, pulses with regret more than ambition. His psychic presence, weaving through the warp space, sometimes mutters indiscernible syllables. Astropaths report those who listen too closely tend to emerge altered, their eyes dull with sorrow, their words fixing on impossible futures or vanished pasts. He is not gone, but neither is he whole. His wound is a chasm, bridged only by denial. The aftershocks ripple out through millennia. On dying worlds, feral populations worship the void itself, naming it the mother of all sacrifices. Isolated psychers draw the entity's symbol in blood, powerless to resist the dream that their annihilation has already been decided. The hidden truth now infects gene line and genome alike, finding expression in art and atrocity alike. In the Imperium, to create is to echo loss.
Every new hope is built atop the bones of prior denial. Sanctioned scholars dare not publicize the full extent of collective amnesia. Too much truth, they argue, is a plague. They teach children to recite the glories of the past, but instruct them to avoid the darkest questions. Why did unity fail? Why does the emperor weep in silence? Why does the universe feel wounded instead of wondrous? Every curriculum is an altar, every lesson a spell of forgetting. Interlaced with tragedy, the narrative of legacy is cosmic, recursive, and melancholy. The Adeptus Sorestiris fill empty hours composing litanies for those lost to the echo. The assassins of Cladis Vindicare and Eversor carry talismans meant to ward off nightmares more ancient than chaos itself. Rogue traders risk obliteration in the hope of grasping a single unedited truth. None ever return the same. The further the Imperium drags itself into the future, the thicker the fog becomes. Progress is indistinguishable from repetition. Vision is inseparable from denial. The wound is both open and hidden, ache and atrophy, testament and prophecy. In the end, all that remains are the echoes, the voices of those who dreamed too much, remembered too clearly, and bore too heavy a cost. The legacy of mankind in the shadow of the entity is not a hymn for the divine, but a lament for the unhealed. In Warhammer 40K, the aftermath of Empire is not rebirth, but an echo that never dies. Each new legend carved from the ruins of memory's wound.
There comes a moment when the wake of history grows quiet, and the survivors of empire stare not at triumph, but at the questions left unspoken. In the sullen hush beyond cathedral bells and the last pulse of dying stars, the wound's truth seeps through cracks in denial, a revelation too vast for prayer and too gentle for accusation. Mankind, wounded and proud, finds itself perpetually circling the same enigma. Why does every ascent end in fall? Every faith rot into fear? Every legend fracture at its highest arc? The answers, a tapestry of half-remembered bargains and buried promises, drift, untouchable, at the edge of consciousness. The void becomes reflection, the mirror where empires see not themselves, but the absence left behind by the entity. On Terra's scorched sanctums, saints and sinners alike tremble at prophecy's shadow. Their words, once rigid with commandment, now limp with uncertainty. There is no certainty, mutters a dying priest, only echoes and their architects. Across the Mechanicum's forge worlds, cogitators loop through paradox. They calculate futures and they recoil before memories. Numbers that describe only loss, never possibility. In the black libraries of the Inquisition, scribes uncover a lesson. Denial does not heal, and forgetting is not redemption. The wound, once made, will reopen with every cycle. On thousands of worlds, the Adeptus Astartes and warrior priests confess in ritual and silence. Their heroism, crowned for eternity by Empire's desperate need, rings hollow when measured against the knowledge that their battles are echoes of a script neither written nor chosen by them. Sometimes, in midnight hours, one asks aloud, "Are we the authors or only the ink?" In the borderlands of legend, truth is never spoken. It is only revealed among the ruins. The greatest horror for humanity is not the wrath of the warp, nor the cunning of chaos, nor even the betrayal of kin. It is the suspicion that no one holds the pen that writes fate. Every victory is weighed down by unseen cost, every dynasty haunted by the chorus of bargains struck in primeval silence. Some believe the emperor, forever enthroned in martyrdom, dreams quietly of undoing the bargain, a redemption born not of war, but of admission, to name the wound, to atone for forgetting. But the galaxy, vast beyond comprehension, resists closure. Forgiveness, it seems, is the one resource unmined, untouched, and unbidden. Across imperial civilization, memory becomes both weapon and shield. Those who cling to glory are gently reminded in nightmares and cosmic echoes of the debt humanity owes to the entity. This debt, unmeasured, undenied, colors every dawn in the Imperium with a tinge of dread. On the rim worlds, where hope flickers as faint as dying starlight, isolated prophets gather. They recite riddles. Destiny is the shape of denial. Freedom, the sigh that follows confession. Here in the periphery, the wound's song is heard most clearly, a melody of sorrow, warning, and communion. The universe is not a tomb nor a cradle, but an archive. Its greatest treasures, the lessons never learned and the myths never named. In the warp, demons mock mankind's endless repetition. They whisper, "The one truth forbidden to your kind is the freedom that comes from remembering." The bravest psychers, those who survive their own visions, emerge changed, silent, reverent, and forever haunted by glimpses of mythlogic beneath reality's wallpaper. Historians persist, cycling through epics, denying the wound in public and privately fearing its omnipresence. To study the past is to risk encountering the pulse of the entity, the reminder that all progress is borrowed, all unity paid in future suffering. Some scholars propose cosmic cycles: ascent, fall, legacy, denial. In truth, the only pattern is that there is always a price, and the wound has infinite patience. Within the sanctums of rogues and heretics, new philosophies rise. Contrition becomes veneration. Heresy becomes inquiry. The few who trace the wound to its origin understand. Mankind's greatest enemy, master and muse, is neither alien nor God, but the silence that follows every truth denied. The Emperor's silent voice lingers in the warp, as if to speak a warning to those willing to listen. I shaped a legend atop a secret. When legend falters, secret remains. His immortality is not escape, but imprisonment, the certainty that denial and prophecy will entwine until no one remembers which thread is their own. Legends are not protection, but promises, every myth a marker for what was paid. In the final hours of cosmic reflection, when the dust settles and legacy is measured, what remains? Not the names of heroes, nor the weight of conquest. It is awareness, a trembling realization that the universe is a tapestry stitched from absences. To contemplate the philosophical wound is to approach madness, but not to contemplate is to claim ignorance as sanctuary. The entity, unseen, unnamed, asks nothing, gives nothing, but shapes everything. Denial becomes foundation, memory becomes destiny, and history becomes prophecy. What if the story is not about good or evil, progress or failure, but about the courage to remember what was erased? What if every legend, every warning, every act of rebellion is not escape from fate, but an embrace of the freedom fate grants to those who see the wound and choose to act differently? If the echoes of this story stirred you, remember, every legend hides a warning. Subscribe and listen for the next one. Let your memory be a light. Dare to gaze behind the veil. The stars are not silent, nor are you alone in the shadow. Watch for the hidden architect and learn what none have named.